I want to welcome all of our guests today to How the Cloud Killed the Firewall. My name is Terry and I'll be your host for today. And as Corey mentioned, we'll do a couple of housekeeping items and then we'll pass this over to the panelists. First of all, for technical support, if you run into any problems along the way, please shoot me an email at terry@cyvatar.ai, or you can also add it into the chat box or Q&A box if you can get to that. Secondly, we are recording this and we do make it available on our YouTube channel. We do post that up into LinkedIn, and you can just go out to YouTube and find our channel there as well. And also we like questions. So along the way, if you have them, add those into the chat box or the Q&A. And then after our panelist discussion, we'll actually go to a live Q&A and I'll allow you to talk and you can ask your actual question. So let's get started. First of all, I want to introduce you to our panelists. We have Corey White, who's the founder and CEO of Cyvatar. Ben Johnson, who's the Chief Technology Officer at Obsidian. Craig Goodwin, who's the Chief Trust and Risk Officer at Fujitsu. And Daniel Hooper, the Chief Information Security Officer over at Borrow Money. Corey, I'm going to pass this over to you.
All right. Thanks, Terry. I'm going to skip my introduction. Ben, you want to quickly introduce yourself and give some background, and we'll just go across there?
Sure. So thanks. Excited to be here with everybody. CTO of Obsidian, and we're a cloud detection and response company. Previously, I was the CTO of Carbon Black, so endpoint detection and response company, and previously before that was NSA and Intel Community. Craig?
Yes, sure. Hi, everyone. Craig Goodwin. I'm the Chief Trust and Risk Officer at Fujitsu. Bit like Ben, background in the intelligence side in the UK government, and then about 20 years as Chief Security Officer or CISO for large and small tech companies. I now run customer trust and security win delivery for Fujitsu.
Thanks, Craig. Daniel Hooper, Chief Information Security Officer of Borrow Money. We're an online challenger bank, very similar to a Chime, but obviously way better. Before joining Varo earlier this year, I was the CISO for PIMCO, the large investment company based out of Newport Beach.
All right. Daniel, I'm sorry, but looks like you lost the kind of war with the wife. I think the rest of us did pretty well, but you got thrown out in the garage.
Yeah.
I will say, based on your garage, you're way more active than I am, so I'll give you that for sure.
Bicycles and motorbike and surfboards and things, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so now you're just throwing off.
I don't get to go surfing at the moment. The beaches are all closed.
Yeah, I could get into that, but we'll leave that alone. Again, thanks everybody for joining. Thanks for the panelists. What's really, really important, and we always start with this, is we at Cyvatar have started Cyvatar Cares, and we continually donate to food banks, which is, you take kind of the Maslow hierarchy of needs, and food and shelter being really at the bottom and most important. And there are a lot of people that don't have food, especially some of the children in LA. So that's hugely important to us here at Cyvatar to make sure that everyone is taken care of. We're on this webinar. We're lucky enough to be in at least somewhat decent shape. So, with gratitude, we're donating. And every company we partner with, we've asked that them make a donation on behalf of a charity of their choice. And so, Ben, I'll let you speak to a place called home.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're really just trying to do what we can in terms of donations, and I think a place called home is one that we're quite happy to support. Helping out kids and really just trying to invest in the community the way we can. So also excited to see the Cyvatar Care stuff. So I think you're seeing this. Sorry to be a little long-winded, but you're seeing this this trend in cyber, where how can we all just do more for charity, I think is the goal.
Right. All right. Thank you. So that's it for slides. Let's get into the meat of it. And in typical Corey fashion, we have some talking points that we're going to talk about, but we had already started talking about CDR. and the whole religious debate around, detection and response and prevention, and, Obsidian, cloud-based detection and response is huge. But obviously, Savitar partners with them. I know they have, prevention capabilities, and more prevention capabilities are coming. So I know the CISOs on the panel, their stance is I will let you guys chime in and say it again, is that I don't want anything automated. But from my perspective, I'd want to automate as much as I can for my customers within reason. But, Daniel, how do you approach automated detection and response and then prevention on top of that?
Yeah, I think the automated detection and response stuff is a great concept. I love the idea of it. It cuts down on, man hours, it cuts down on response times and dwell times and all that sort of stuff. I think there needs to be some guardrails in it though. I think some of that automated stuff can, trigger on things that fall a little outside of the norm, but not far enough to really look like attacker type traffic. It may just be, someone trying to, game a particular API, for referrals or something like that. I think I was joking with the guys earlier here that I kind of sit on the fence between protection and detection kind of thing. So, while I want to see the detection, I want someone with eyes on glass and things, but I do also want some of that automated prevention stuff as well.
Great.
Yeah, I think I'd agree, right? I think if you look, why does everyone laugh when Corey says Craig? He's just going to tee me up. So I think, yeah, I'd agree with Daniel. I think, you don't want to go to extremes either way. In my experience, and I was saying this to Ben beforehand, we want automated response, right? We do want that. The ROI on that, if you sell it in the right way, is there. You reduce resources, the time to impact is quicker. All that kind of stuff is a really strong story. From my personal perspective, having tried to do it in both like the SOAR camp and the cloud camp, the reality of being able to get there in terms of taking some action as a result of automation has been very limited, right? And the trust from the business to allow you to do that is pretty low, right? So I think from my perspective, there's a lot of convincing to do, a lot of work to be done to get a CISO, to enable a CISO to get to a position where he's comfortable allowing a technology to take an automated response or automated protection without any eyes on glass,
Yeah, I think minimizing the impact, if you're going to be segmenting someone off a network into an investigation zone or something like that, they can't do their normal business. If that's because of a false positive and you slow them down for the day, that's not a great result, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Ben, you pioneered the whole detection and response revolution, and now you're bringing that to the cloud, but you also bring in prevention capabilities. How have you evolved this? I mean, what's the deal here? What's the answer? I'm sure you figured it out.
I figured everything out. No, obviously I have not. I think I think there's a couple focus areas here. The first is you can automate, maybe if I start with automation that gets prevention or sort of protection or what have you first, second. If you automate the retrieval of information and context and pulling all that together, that saves a ton of time. And then if you let a human be this little sliver of like a step, and then a human can sort of review what's going on, and then there's automation once they've decided, yeah, this is okay and the corrective actions are okay. I think everyone on the call would be at least somewhat comfortable, and to I think both Daniel and Craig's comments, it sort of depends on the context or the action. But the point is, if you pull information together, and you can figure out, okay, what is the corrective action to take? Okay, maybe both of those steps are automated, but there's still that human mind in the middle. And then I think to reduce the number of times you have to do that, that's when you figure out, how can I improve the hygiene settings so I have fewer of these kinds of events, or how can I do other things that aren't necessarily slowing down the business, but they're making it less likely that this kind of detective event occurs, right? So I think that's where I'm thinking a lot about is how do we make detection really solid, but also how does that have a feedback loop to make that less common, right? But not necessarily slow down the business. So I think that's
Okay, agreed. I think there's a combination. As you know, I have a little bit of background around, getting from detection to prevention myself. It is definitely a combination of, humans going through, I think, cleaning through falsing, and is also what you're actually doing. You should not impact the business. So a lot of work needs to be done up front to make sure there's no business impact. And then once everybody gets comfortable, then you can move over to the preventative approach and monitor that. So that's really the best way to do it.
I think a really important word that was mentioned there, Corey, was context, right? So I think, I bang on forever about context and analysis are the only things that you add value from a security perspective. Without that, every business is different. Without those context and analysis, and what I've always found just challenging from a vendor perspective is that it takes a long time, particularly in a larger business, to build up that context and knowledge of the business, whether it's cloud environments or on-prem, to know how things, we've had the asset management webcast, and every CISO to ST currently struggles already with knowing what assets they've got, right? So they equally struggle with understanding the context within which they're working, what's important, what's not important from a risk and operational perspective. So to your point, Ben, I think that upfront work, if you're going to move towards automated response, has got to be done to do the basics first and understand the context within which you're working.
Yeah. One little nugget to that point, Craig. I'll throw in, again, going back to my past life, but I got it down to a science. I realized it took 100 days on average, across hundreds and hundreds of customers to actually get to the level where you could actually get to an automated prevention perspective. And what I think really the challenge is that most companies or vendors or consulting companies or whatever, they don't want to go through the pain of that 100 days or whatever it is per technology. But once you go through that pain of it and you know exactly what's going to happen and you build your proper responses for each one of those, then you can actually get to prevention using great technology. It's just an investment up front. That said, I'll go back to some of our talking points here. But first and foremost, I got a question. Have we actually digitally transformed now? Everybody talks about, the digital transformation. Have we digitally transformed? Are we done? Did COVID force it?
All Fujitsu's customers are.
Varo is absolutely,
100%.
Yeah, Varo as well, and Obsidian, of course, and Cybertars.
Yeah.
But other than that group of people, no. So I think I think there's a couple of things, right? I think you go back and try and define what digitally transformed means, and I'd be interested to hear from Daniel and Ben what digital transformation truly means for them in the context of their organization, right? That word context is gonna keep cropping up, I think. If I boil down to, I think, what the essence of the question is, security within a digital world, I think, we were normally as CISOs, we will tend to say, because it's easier to say, are we more or less secure, and actually, I wouldn't say we're either end of the spectrum. I would say it's just different. And things evolve, right? The types of controls we use evolve. The way we approach security evolves, i.e. we're looking more at detection, we're looking more at monitoring rather than prevention than perhaps we were before. So the way that we interact with the business, the way that we interact and use controls changes, but I wouldn't say that either increases or decreases the risk necessarily. It's just different.
Yeah, I think the biggest transformation, with this whole digital transformation stuff is enabling people to work how they want to work, rather than being pinned to a desktop connected to a data center with a fleet of servers in it. You've got a laptop at Starbucks hitting SaaS-based stuff in the cloud, authenticating through a third party like an Okta or something like that. I mean, Ben, you're probably seeing, huge numbers of people using huge numbers of SaaS-based providers. I mean, going from PIMCO, which is a very traditional desktop data center kind of model with some, migration strategies to cloud and things like that, to a very young company like Varo, digitally native, everything in the cloud, everyone with a laptop, all that sort of stuff. It doesn't change what we're trying to do. We're still trying to protect customer information, employee information, meet privacy law and regulatory requirements and things. We still do identity management. We're still doing detection and response and things like that. We're just doing it in a different way. I think the way that our staff wants to work and the way our customers want to interact with us has changed.
I think
Oh, Ben?
Our company ourselves, we're 3 years old, so we're just MacBook Pros, SaaS, and AWS kind of thing. But what we see out there too is like I think digital transformation, the word or the term, is fuzzy what that actually means. But I think one thing that is quite true, at least in my travels, is it's accelerated. Like all this, cloud or everything's online or digital. Like you can get better faster, or you can get into trouble faster, right? One of my favorite quotes from a friend of mine is, we're creating the same mess in the cloud in 10 days that took 10 years on-prem to create, right? And so, yeah, I think it's all about just we can move faster, and like I'm sure you all like you have to say yes to the business as much as possible, or they're just going to go around you. Whereas before, you'd see a truckload of servers come in and, sort of get an idea, oh yeah, our surface area is expanding. Now it's like someone signed up for Google Cloud when the rest of your company is using AWS because they didn't want to get monitored or whatever. So yeah, I think it's definitely an interesting world, and, people are moving fast. But I did want to throw out one thing. I don't know if you guys saw this, but Microsoft just said in the last 2 months, they've had 2 years worth of cloud migration business. So, obviously the climate has really accelerated some of that.
Well, I think the key word is transformation, isn't it? So it's change. It's not just lift and shift, right? We're not just replicating. So the business is changing. Therefore, security needs to change in the way, to Dan's point, that it approaches the business and that it does stuff. And I think, for too long, or there's current organizations that are trying to take their existing controls and their existing technology and map it to a brand new way of working. And that's just not the way we're going to work.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, I think what I'm seeing with our customers is that they're less secure. But to your point, just like you said, Craig, they're using their old legacy approach and then trying to apply this to this digitally transformed world, and they're just don't know how to do it. Number one, take the expertise. The expertise was on-prem expertise, not cloud AWS expertise. The tools they have were on-prem tools, and not cloud, AWS or Azure, so on and so forth. So we're less secure, and so we have to teach people how to be secure in this new world, because one, the expertise isn't there. Two, the tools are relatively new, which I really like. I like when newer tools, you can get there much faster, to Ben's point. But all in all, I'm seeing less security, and it's not on purpose. It's just they don't know better yet. There's not a lot of maturity around it.
Well, and speaking from a CISO's perspective, and I'm sure Dan can add this as well, from a CISO point of view, what the majority of the business are doing is just adding stuff rather than transforming or replacing, right? So if you're, as a CISO, sat there with a finite amount of budget, actually someone goes and ventures into the cloud, I'm putting my CISO hat on now, ventures into the cloud, right? But without removing something that's on-prem, to your point, Corey, I still need those old tools, right? I still need the stuff to protect the stuff that's on-prem, but then now I need new stuff as well. So the business understands that it's trying to transform, and normally there's an ROI associated with going to the cloud. We're going to save money, but the security guy sat there in the middle going, well, wait a minute, I've still got to protect both, and that's the same from an IT perspective. That's the same from an operational perspective. So the challenge of a CISO is trying to build this box of tricks and being able to scale and work with vendors to find solutions that can either bridge both those worlds, or can at least work in partnership with the CISO to be able to go on that journey with them and help with that transformation.
Yeah, that's a great.
So the workload is doubled. So Daniel, your workload's doubled? Or no, you're a new company, so you're good, actually.
Yeah, I know. Get rid of all that legacy stuff that I used to have to deal with and everything. But yeah, I mean, a lot of CISOs, when you get into this transformation world, like you said, it's not like, you're building two things and you're maintaining the existing environment, you're building a new one, and then you turn on the new one in a production, way, and, starts doing production workloads in the cloud or whatever. You don't turn off the old one though. You know, you end up running the two in parallel for sometimes a year at a time or something like that. So as a CISO, you end up splitting your time and saying, well, I'm going to do blocking and tackling and maintenance over here. I'm going to do architecture and design over here. And I'm going to do, you know, detection and response and, you know, future state stuff over this way. So you end up almost with 3 streams of work across the environment kind of thing, which, you know, when your budget has a fixed ceiling to it, gets very challenging to do that.
You've already made a genius insight there, Dan, which is the creation of a security strategy around the business imperatives, right? And you've said it there already, because I know you're doing this, right? Is looking at where you are to invest, where you're to maintain and run, you know, and having that business focused conversation to understand where it is that the business is going in terms of strategic direction is how you begin to build that investment proposal around the security function.
And that's
right?
where you get into the fun stuff. You know, you can't just take the patterns and say, okay, well, data centers need a border router and a firewall and then, you know, cages and stuff like that and UPSs and, you know, whatever. You say, okay, do that in Amazon. Okay, well, that doesn't really translate. You know, you can deploy a, you know, Fortinet or a Palo Alto in the cloud. That's fine. You can do that, but you don't need to. You know, you need to think more about this as a service-oriented kind of, you know, system or something like that. But that takes some thinking and some learning. The security team has to evolve along with that thinking. They can't take the standard patterns anymore. So it does require that sort of more strategic investment of time and thought process and stuff like that. But at the same time, you can't take your eyes off the old systems. You still need to keep the existing stuff up and running, the blocking and tackling that I mentioned.
So the CISO workload is doubled.
Pretty much, yeah. Always. And the budget went down.
So Ben, you're the FixIt guy. How do we fix all this? You know, how do we make it easier on the
CISO? Burn the old stuff to the ground, I think.
No pressure, Ben. No pressure.
Yeah. I agree.
Actually, I think the first thing is I'm still a bit surprised how many parts of business units or, you know, business leaders don't realize that the security burden, I guess you could say, or opportunity is on themselves, like their own companies. You know, I think there's still a lot of misunderstanding around, oh, I'm moving to Office 365 or Salesforce or AWS or whatever, so they're going to handle it. It's like, no. That's the fastest route to, you know, data leaks or whatever. So I think there's still a lot of education that has to happen. Secondly, I think there are some built-in tooling and controls in every system that you're bringing on board. I mean, some are terrible, but some are, you know, quite good. And then it's a matter of how do you pull those into your stack or your team. And I think people were completely born, most security teams were completely born in the network security, network monitoring world, and then they shifted to the host, you know, EDR endpoint, all the, you know, explosion of sort of malware. So they've really gotten good at diving into binaries and processes and stuff, and now they're trying to figure out, well, how do I learn? Like, what is, like, if there's no malware in SaaS or in AWS, what are the risks there? Like, what do I need to learn? So I think there's definitely a human component, but there are some things you can do. I think to what all these guys and yourself too, Corey, are saying is, you gotta sort of incorporate the new security controls into the business project. You can't just have business explode in their usage of all this new stuff, and then security is off to the side, still fighting with, as Daniel said, a decreasing budget. So I think there has to be more of a shared budget responsibility across these.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think one of the things I've always said when I go into a new CISO role, or any role actually, is my ultimate aim as a CISO should be to have zero budget, right? And it's a little bit flippant, but actually, if you think of the CISO's budget as protecting the organization, actually my goal over a period of time and my strategy should be to embed security within the business to such a point that, to your point, Ben, you know, product development or R&D or IT have security baked in as part of their overall budget, as part of their operating costs. Because, you know, if you think about something like developers, they think about quality as a key function of the software they're building. They don't necessarily think about security, right? And I feel like security is just another offshoot of quality. You can't create quality software if it's not secure, you know? So that ethos about building it in has got to be fundamental to digital transformation, because then that helps get over that challenge of just continually increasing centralized security budgets that you're going to be onto a losing battle with.
I think we could do another whole panel on that concept, Corey.
I know.
Security.
The June time frame, yeah.
Security as a
For
quality
sure.
control and development, and then performance security as a performance metric, and infrastructure, and that sort of stuff. I love it. That's great.
Well, the opportunity as well. I think the other point that you made, Ben, about controls being built in. I think the positive slant on all this is that there's a massive opportunity, right? If I think about legacy and the incredibly hard slog of trying to, we've been talking about patching last week, we talked about asset management, the hard slog of pulling all that legacy stuff into the modern day is really, really hard. But you've got an opportunity with that transformation to, okay, maybe not perfect, but utilize inherent controls that come as part of cloud environments or come as part of cloud tooling to create better security. We're always driving, we shouldn't have great being the enemy of good. If we can be good controls from the outset into some of this stuff, then we should utilize that. And there's a real opportunity with those new technologies to do that from the outset. So I think that's a real positive.
So Ben, how do people embrace new technologies? I mean, they're mostly, like you said, and we've all talked about on this panel, I'm an old school kind of network security guy, and I'll talk about firewalls, my baby, in a minute here. But how do we get people that are old school still thinking with firewall old mentality to come to everything's in the cloud, and you got to secure and have some visibility via SaaS applications and monitor those SaaS applications, and how you get people there?
Well, I think on the positive side, a lot of security teams are inherently curious, or they understand that InfoSec is like never-ending sort of learning and journey. And so I think most teams, when they see new tech, or they get to say, oh, I'm going to work on securing, G Suite because we just installed that, or, Azure Cloud or whatever. I think there is some excitement. Now, they might already be overwhelmed and frustrated at their never-ending list of projects that these guys are giving them. But I think there is some inherent sort of excitement and curiosity. So that's a positive. I think trying to figure out ownership and what they can and can't do is one of the maybe newer challenges, and you guys can all sort of correct me if you feel differently. But what I've seen a lot actually in SaaS and IaaS is the security team's like, okay, we're actually excited. We're gonna try new tech, or we're just gonna pull data out of these APIs, the audit logs, whatever, and we're gonna try to really tackle the cloud footprint. But guess what? Office 365 is owned by this person over here. Salesforce is way over here by like the sales team or someone on the business side. Workday or someone like that's like owned by HR. And we actually see it's hard for security teams to even get access sometimes to these systems. And then maybe AWS or whatever is owned by engineering, and they're telling security to stay the heck out, right? So I think there's a lot of inherent excitement. It's really, okay, how do I tackle these problems? And then a lot of it's like the internal business navigation of how do I get an API token or get access to these logs, or some of these other things, these security controls, with, again, the number one thing being, don't disrupt the business. So I'd love to hear what these guys have to say, but that's what I see a lot, is not an inherent dislike or lack of wanting to fix these things. It's more like, how do I fix it? And then how do I work with my team to get the right access or the right, sort of buy-in?
Yeah. So Craig, when you're writing that book on embedding security throughout the organization,
I'm writing it now. I'm sorry, I'm not concentrating. I was writing my book. Yeah, so I'd say a couple of things. I think that's a cultural issue, Ben, right? That we talk about there. I think one is, so I'd say from the CISO perspective, you've got to dump your ego, right? We've touched on it here. I think, you've got to be focused on what your business objective is, which is to reduce risk for the business. And I've been in that situation a lot of times. I've taken over from a lot of predecessors who were very focused on, I'll give you a real world example. They've decided what the tool is for dynamic code analysis, or they've decided what the tool is for static code analysis, and the business can go shoot if it doesn't work or understand their particular amount of code, right? Because it's what security is decided on. Now, that's a different focus from, actually, to your point, you can put the tools in the hands of the developers and make them responsible. If they're excited about it, recruit them to the security army, right? Like I've said before, and use that excitement to drive risk down within the business. So I think that cultural shift for the CISO internally about getting the right outcomes for the business rather than building an internal organization and creating my own CV, it is really, really important. And then the other thing, I think, when you talk about reaching out to other parts of the business, that's the soft skills stuff, right? Malcolm's got a great little diagram. I can't steal his book. I'm sure he's copyrighted it. But he's got a great little diagram around Malcolm Harkins, who we talked to in an earlier webcast, about the qualities of a CISO and how a business-minded CISO versus a tech CISO. That cultural bit, I can't remember who wrote the first 90 days, but they said, go buy a Starbucks card, because it just pays dividends in 12 to 18 months time. To your point, when you want to go and talk to the guy that runs sales, yeah, the link might not be obvious immediately, but build that relationship, because it's so important when you need to reach out about Salesforce, or you need to make some positive change from a security perspective, that you've built those relationships, So put as much work into building business relationships as you do the technical product portfolio would be my advice.
That's been the hardest thing with the whole lockdown, being new into the role. Just started in February, right? I got to spend the first few weeks of my role up there buying coffees for the tech guys and, getting to sit down with the developers and doing some whiteboarding and stuff. Thankfully, I got to do that before the lockdown. And actually, a friend of mine just transitioned into his very first CISO role, which is a great opportunity for him. And, he's doing it in the midst of lockdown. So he's having to break those silos and make those links and, build that rapport with people over Zoom and stuff. But that was my advice to him was, get to know your stakeholders, get to know, upwards and downwards, who's around you kind of thing. Because that, to Ben's point, that's the hardest part, is getting people onto the path, getting them to understand the why we're doing this and why it's important, etc. Ben, you made a really cool point about, using some of the, technologies to kind of, bring these things together to give visibility to people and stuff. That can be a really powerful silo breaker as well, to say, hey, look what we've done with all of these folks. I want you on this journey too.
Yeah, visibility is huge from a vendor perspective. The vendors that have been most successful for me have given me visibility before they've even asked me to commit, right? Because they've worked in partnership with me to go to a board or go to an executive team that are perhaps a little bit in denial, to be able to say, look, here's the visibility, here's what's actually happening, and that ability to partner and to utilize that visibility to create an ongoing relationship is just huge, because you need that data now. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt doesn't work so much anymore. You need to go in with factual, empirical data that says, look what's going on in the organization, whether that be in the cloud, or whether that be on-prem, or whether that be in IT, or whether that be in development, physical even. You need that empirical data to back up what you're saying.
I don't know. I had a salesperson reach out on LinkedIn the other day, told me that I was at risk.
Well, you personally or the organization?
Not sure. I had to reach out and find out. What do you mean? Am I at risk? What's going on?
There we go. There's going to be a bunch of LinkedIn messages. You're at risk, and a whole new sales pitch is out there. So pivoting a little bit here to really the other side, which I think is near and dear to my heart, incident response. So when you think about incident response in the cloud and having some kind of log and visibility as to what is actually happening, how do you solve that? And I'll let you go last, Ben, but how do you know what is happening now in this new world? It used to be, you log from your firewall, all network devices are going to your SIEM, and you get alerts and have an MSSP, and you know what's happening. Those days are gone because everything's now in the cloud. How do you know what's happening?
Yeah, I'm not sure we're getting log files from Dropbox and things like that, right? Yeah, that stuff that doesn't traditionally spit out a syslog that you can bring into a SIEM and put alerts and so on, right? So I think that's kind of part of the problem is, where do you need the visibility from? Like, what are your sources? That traditional model of, these are my 50 sources, they go into this central system, etc. That traditional model changes now. Identifying incidents can come from anywhere, pretty much. And even there's stuff like third-party data breaches and things that don't come through a traditional SOC, but that's still part of your incident response. So I think it's still the same challenge. It's still getting the sources, getting the visibility, and having the response, and understanding what it is you're looking for. and who and how to respond.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think we again, we're pivoting, right, as a function, and we're looking at different ways of ingesting. I like Dan's kind of, that's going to go in the book. That's chapter 2. Dan's ideas on the categories of what we need for incident response. I think visibility, you're absolutely right, is number one, right? And whereas within a traditional file system, if someone uploaded something, we'd see it. Now we're perhaps looking in DLP, or we're looking in Obsidian or something of that nature that's helping us to get visibility. But I think that visibility is absolutely key. I think where the shift is as we talked about earlier, is prevention to monitoring now, right? Is watching what people are doing, having the ability to watch what people are doing, and then be able to react on it based on the context of the organization. So actually, in my mind, I think that shifts us more towards a reactionary model than we were perhaps before, which is interesting. Again, it's almost setting us back, a step. We thought we'd done really well with on-prem. We were moving towards automated response now, and actually we're going back a step. I'm hoping Ben can convince me different, but I think, we're now stepping back into the unknown again. We're starting with monitoring, we're starting with logging, getting visibility, and that maturity level needs to shift into the new digital world again.
I'm cringing. Don't say that going backwards reaction. Because I'll give my analogy, and anybody who heard me speaking, for years I've said this. Is when I'm traveling and my wife and kids, are at home, and I get an alert on my phone that says someone's in my kid's room. That's the alert that scares the shit out of me. Like, I don't want that alert. I'd rather say, hey, somebody's banging on my kid's window, outside the window, and it got blocked or whatever. I want to investigate that. I don't want to investigate somebody's in my kid's room. The same thing applies to someone's inside your network, or somebody's inside your cloud, or somebody logs into your Office 365. It's too damn late. I mean, my pen testing background kicks in, where I'm like, if I've already got access and I've accessed systems, then I just think it's too late by the time you go through your whole response process to stop me from doing what I'm doing malicious. So anyway, also, so boxes off. I'm sorry. Ben, go ahead.
Well, I think there's something in that, right? Just to add to that, I think, if you talk about analogies and you think about the shift from a house mentality to a hotel now, right? And actually, so there's a couple of things. If I was talking to a vendor, Ben, I would say, look, we need probably smaller instances of what each vendor is offering, but we need a bigger tool set. As a CISO, I need to have smaller bits, but of lots of different things, because I've got a hotel to protect, and all of those hotel rooms are worth different things to me, right? They're of different import. It might be that Cora's family's in one hotel room, and I might just have some stuff I don't care about in another one, So I need to think about how I protect each of those hotel rooms. All that means is I need loads of different tools. I just need a smaller amount. I can't just go and rely on the one enterprise provider now to give me everything I possibly need to secure my enterprise.
So, Greg, how we get on your good list? So I'm in the nice hotel room where you're going to take care of me first.
You're in the suite. The suite.
Yeah. Okay. I don't care about you side of the hotel. I'm just saying.
You're in the penthouse suite. You're good.
Yeah. I mean, I'm living now in this, cloud SaaS, IaaS, I think a little more SaaS detection and response world. And I think I'll get more to incident response in a second, but to talk about a previous topic, we're saying, even if you start to get more sort of buy-in from the business owners, or the application owners and stuff like that, we all get quite comfortable with, what does an attack look like on the network, or ransomware or malware or whatever. But then when you start talking about like Dropbox or Office 365, people are like, well, what is like a threat, or what does an IOC, or some of those things look like in those systems? So I think that adds to some of the challenge around, like, what are you supposed to do, right? Now, luckily on the incident response side, it's a little more obvious what you're supposed to do. Maybe not, but I think in my mind it's a little more obvious. First of all, you have to get access in some way or another. You have to turn on audit logs. Some of these systems don't have logs on by default. You get hit and you're like, oh, there's no, like, Microsoft didn't have logs on, or whatever. So I think you have to start there. And then where teams start to run into challenges, I think, is, assuming they made it past those first kind of, checkpoints around, getting data or getting access, they might be looking across a bunch of different systems. Each log is like totally different. some are quite verbose, and I wouldn't necessarily say they're nice, but they're nicer, and some are horrible, like just quite horrible kind of garbage, I'll just say it. And so then from an incident responder, you're trying to piece together all this new telemetry, new data that you're not comfortable with. You got used to, Windows event logs or Wireshark logs or whatever you're using. And now you're trying to piece together a Dropbox log, and did they log in through Okta, or what happened, and who accessed this shared file or whatever. So I think a lot of it comes down to how do you pull together that visibility, but then you have to pick a few that you're going to concentrate on. Like you guys probably have, like Daniel, your company's maybe a little newer, so probably fewer, but you might have hundreds of different applications. You might use every IaaS provider under the sun. So you sort of have to, I think, pick and choose what you're going to tackle first. And, it's presumably like an email system or a file sharing system or something that's, used by most of your population, just because that's probably where you're going to see the most incidents. But maybe it's a 20-person app that's just super critical to your company, and so you have to be quickly responding to any sort of anomalies or anything. So I think there's just a lot of challenge there of how do we tackle this problem, and I like to say we can help, and I'm happy to talk about that more, but I think just in general teams don't really know what they should do because it's such an overwhelming surface area.
I think what we're all saying as well is you got to start with the process, right? So I think like Dan said, I think the process stays pretty solid, right? If you're talking about incident response or you're talking about anything else, you want to start with the business process first. That's why we don't start with technology, right? You start with the process. We want to get visibility is number one. And how do you get that visibility? And you need to define that in the cloud or on-prem. And
I know you guys have already had this conversation about asset management, so I don't want to get too much into that. But I love Ben's point about getting the visibility, understanding the landscape kind of thing. And I'm going to put my risk/CISO hat on and talk about taking a risk-based approach to these.
Oh, take it off. Take it off.
It's too early in the morning. Ben said it in a much more technical, eloquent way than I would. But yeah, I mean, I was surprised, for Varo, for a reasonably young company, very cloud native, all that sort of stuff. As we started getting into, okay, well, where's our data? The question of what do we care about and where is it and who's got access to it, right? Basic questions. I was, to be honest, pretty shocked about just the number of SaaS-based providers that are used by a fairly young company kind of thing. The proliferation of this stuff can feel like it's out of control sometimes. Well, it's not, but I think the other shocking thing is that I always challenge people on is okay, you're using Dropbox, using Google Cloud, G Drive, that sort of stuff. How many files are shared with how many outside people? You think this is a tool used by your teams and your company and stuff like that? I think people would be shocked if they start asking the question of how many outsiders have access to our data and how do we manage that access as well? So, getting that visibility into not just what you've got in your umbrella of stuff to worry about, but how's it being used? That's the biggest issue there.
And like to your point, Dan, as well, you've got to define what the risk is you're worried about, right? You often see people say, I wouldn't ever use Google Docs, or I wouldn't ever use, Dropbox or whatever, which is a pretty rash statement. But if you have a coffee with them and you talk to them, you try and understand what is the real risk we're talking about here? Is it because you don't trust Google? Or is it because you don't trust Dropbox? Or is it because you don't trust the security controls preventing someone else from coming in? What is it that you're concerned about? And then we can talk about that on a risk basis, right? And we can understand what we need to do in order to reduce that particular risk, not just this inherent fear I've got of Dropbox generally,
Or you don't trust yourself to manage it appropriately.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
So, one last question, and we'll ask. I mean, we're open up now. If you guys have questions, we'll definitely ask them, or have you speak and ask them. But for me, what I'm trying to wrap my head around is, how do you define in the cloud context, a secure user or secure data in the cloud? How is that defined? I mean, I could probably define it on an on-prem internal network, but in a cloud context, what does that look like? So Ben's nodding, so I think you have the answer.
I have to think about, I mean, you guys obviously have to think about this too, but you think probably about a lot of other stuff that I don't necessarily have to think about. So, I mean, it depends. I'll steal that. It depends. I think I think you have to consider what your concerns are, right? And so first of all, like you probably have some concern around external adversaries or sort of unauthorized access into your accounts. Then you probably have some concern about maybe malicious insiders. What can they do? And then you have some concerns around most of these tools are used for collaboration or whatever. So, okay, so how easy is it for mistakes to happen or oversharing or over granting privileges? And from there, I think that starts to drive which problems are you going to tackle? Like, quite frankly, if you have SSO and you have MFA, you're probably pretty good from an external adversary perspective. Now, you might still have, just to throw it out there, we see basic authentication still enabled in Microsoft, which means you don't need even if you have MFA turned on, you can log in without MFA. It's kind of a crazy sort of backdoor way to get email and stuff. But we see that all the time with anyone who's still left it open. Their users get phished. Yeah, they have MFA, but they can still get into their mailbox, send spam, get their email, etc. So I think that's when you have to start getting more detailed around, what are my actual settings or controls and things like that. But yeah, I mean, you have to start with, what do I care about? And then you have to start again on coverage. Like, okay, I really care about this, and I can only care about this really for like 5 different apps or this cloud or whatever. So, I think I could talk all day about this, but I think it really starts with kind of what do you care about, and then which apps, like from a business or a risk perspective, like a threat vector or risk vector perspective, and then, sort of which part of your surface area can you start to tackle that.
Just while you were talking there, Ben, I was thinking about the concentric circles of a layered defense in depth methodology and stuff like that. And I'm like, Corey's point, when you put it in a network, you put something on the inside of a network behind a layer of firewalls with intrusion detection systems and that sort of stuff. I'd pose a question back to the panelists and things. Does the layers of defense in depth change or go away now with the cloud? Do we keep that same old kind of thinking? To Corey's point, if I bury something in the middle of a network, hard to get to, I've now moved it to the cloud.
Yeah.
Do I still think about those layers of defense, or do I need to think about this totally differently?
Well, I think you do, but I think you have multiple ones, right? So I'll start drawing it. I haven't used my whiteboard for ages. I can draw it on the white. I think we have. So I think you're right. I think we still have those concentric circles. It's just it's flexible and there's multiple ones now, right? So whereas we had this big one in the middle, to my analogy about a house, and then we could just draw these circles radiating out from them. Now it's like, I don't even know what you'd call that. Lots of circles, right? Some have got multiple, to Ben's point, and then you take the feed from what's important to me, right? So my crown jewels, my customer data, whatever it is I'm protecting, might have 20 circles radiating out from it in terms of the layers of defense that I want to put around that, right? Whereas something that I don't particularly care about might have less circles, So I think we still have, I think that concept still stands firm. It's just used in a different way to articulate the way we're trying to protect the multiple facets of our organization now.
So could you say then that any data that's classified as public gets moved into Dropbox, but other stuff gets kept internally?
Yeah, well, I think you could. I think you have to start from process and policy, right? I think you have to decide what we do where.
Well, but see, defined internally. Internally could be AWS, okay?
Yep.
And have a customer, now, and we're doing, my life obviously has been pen testing and all that, and so we're doing external scans and internal network scans, but now we're doing internal AWS scans and external AWS scans. So the internal and external have evolved, and now there's a whole nother internal and external. And I don't know if everybody's thinking about it that way. They're still thinking that traditional, hey, my external network and internal networking is not that anymore. You actually got to look at it, a different way. And so we have to continue to evolve to address what this new world looks like. To me, the layers of defense, what used to be, and I said earlier, you had your hard, crunchy shell and your chewy inside. But to me, when you're in the cloud, you got 2-factor, and that's pretty much it. In many cases, if you don't have 2-factor, then you have username and password, and that's one fish away from you being compromised. And it's a whole nother world that we have to think about. I think we've lost a lot of layers, and we have to address it as being more secure in the context of the cloud means we got to figure out what those layers look like in the cloud.
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely.
Okay, Ben, we can hand it over to you and let you kind of give a good overview of Obsidian and CDR. As many folks on the call and panel know, Savitar has partnered with Obsidian to make sure that the operational side of it is taken care of. We manage Obsidian, we manage alerts. It's interesting. We have one very, very large customer, and they have like thousands of alerts, and we're working through those alerts, get that down to 0, and investigate what those actually are. And so, that is a process that many companies don't have someone internally to handle. They're still, as you said, Daniel, they're handling the old legacy network, and now they got this whole cloud network they have to secure, and all these SaaS and IaaS applications that they haven't looked at. And so that needs to be addressed, but they don't have the manpower or body power or woman power to do it. So anyway, that's how we tie in, and we have partnered. But Ben, I'll let you kind of talk to and tell us more about Obsidian.
Yeah, so thanks, Corey. Thanks, everyone. Great discussion. Yeah, I mean, Obsidian, we're a cloud detection and response platform. We're a cloud security platform. Basically, we are a SaaS app. With a couple clicks, you tend to onboard, Office 365, G Suite, Salesforce, et cetera, to our platform. And then we do the work of pulling all the data out of the APIs, all the event logs, normalize all that information, and then really give you continuous monitoring, right? So continuous monitoring, and then looking for threats, helping you do incident response and triage, looking for risk and hygiene problems. So calling out if you don't have MFA or you have these different, poor settings to Corey's point, if you can help reduce the number of downstream, responses or detections, then that's a win, right? So it's really threat detection, response, hygiene, and sort of risk assessment. Two of our most recent integrations are GitHub and Zoom. So people are super pumped that they can see who has access to their repos, or we just announced this last week, who's connecting to all your Zoom meetings, who's recording them, who's scheduling meetings in the future with poor settings and things like that, so you can get ahead of the problem. So yeah, really just trying to make it easy and sort of take almost like a SaaS approach to securing SaaS, where a couple clicks and you get a nice dashboard, but we did all the work of pulling all the data and storing it and sort of analyzing it and stuff. So would love to chat more to anyone who's interested. We have a free trial. If you don't want to talk to us and you just want to try it, like, you can go to our website and do a free trial if you're not into the the hand holding and proof of concept type approach. But otherwise, yeah, really excited to learn more about SaaS and IaaS threats, and I think we've seen a lot of interesting stuff. So happy to comment more just from a sort of a threat research or security perspective in the future as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Ben. Terry, you want to close us out?
I sure will. If you want more information, let me get this going here. Over in the chat pane, I gave you the links that Ben referred to. So let me get this live up on the screen here, but you can find the links. You can copy those and go out to your browser and take a look at those. They've got a product demo, a free trial offer, and I believe the next one is a fireside chat webinar. And also in our CXO Cyber series, next week we'll talk about application security. And the week following that is continuous security validations. You can check those out. And if you have more information, feel free to reach out to us here at Savitar. And there's contact information there, as well as check out our LinkedIn page and our Twitter page. Corey, I'll pass this back to you to close.
Okay. Well, hey, thanks everybody, and I appreciate the panel and Ben for allowing me to throw all kind of stones at you, and you guys handle it, with grace, and then throw too many back at me. Not yet, anyway. But I really appreciate this. This is a great conversation, and I feel like we could have talked on and on for quite a few hours here on these topics. But looking forward to the next one. I think it's in a few weeks actually. So that we'll continue this series. Again, this is all recorded. And please join our LinkedIn and Twitter channels. So thank you all.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.